Hey everybody, and welcome to Bible Study That Doesn't Suck. This is Pastor Megan back in San Francisco in my little office where the sun is determined to shine through my blinders and into the video no matter how I position myself. I'm the pastor of Grace Lutheran, gracesf.com. You can join us any Sunday in person, 10:30 a.m. or via our live stream online.
Good morning. I am Pastor Amanda Zentz. I serve at Central Portland in Northeast Portland on 21st and Schuyler. And I'm coming to you from home this morning because I continue to feel a little bit under the weather, which is so neat. So any of you out there who are wrestling with this flu and cold season, my sympathies are with you. And lots and lots and lots of fluids. That's right. Drink your water, everybody. I have enough tea next to me to choke a horse, so it should be fun.
Don't choke horses.
Don't choke horses. You can join us at Central at 10:15 on Sunday mornings. This coming Sunday, which is January 18th, we are going to have a guest preacher. Reverend Anita Hill is going to be with us, and she will be at 9 a.m. telling her story of incredible strength for our adult education hour, so you can join us at 9 a.m. for that, and then she will be preaching for us at 10:15 in our worship service, and then you're welcome to join us at the RIC service for the local area out in Beaverton at St. Andrew's Lutheran Church, where Anita will again be preaching, and we'll be having a great big festival celebrating reconciling in Christ status, which is the openly welcoming and affirming process in the ELCA for congregations who would like to make public their welcome of LGBTQIA folks.
Yeah. Hey Amanda, I heard you were in a book and that this is the ginormous, oversized, large print version of said book.
Hey Megan, I heard you were in the book too. And it's a great, big, giant, pretty book with one of the fabulous triptychs that's in your congregation. And folks could even learn how to make those triptychs on their own because that is made out of cardboard and old magazines.
And a helium balloon. This is a helium balloon. Because my congregation hates helium balloons. And they're banned forever from our sanctuary because they get grumpy about it.
They go up into the rafters, and they're really hard to get down.
That's right.
That's right. So, see that tea? Anyone? Tea?
So I'll put a link to the book down here if you like our shameless plug and are curious about our fictional Bible stories that flesh out parts of the Bible and or add diverse groups that you might have a hard time finding in the original text. Some of them are very geeky, history-centered. Some of them are just fun stories. Some of them are perfect for days like today because we have a Corinthians text written by Paul about how the women in town were listening to what he was saying about how you should be celibate. And as a result, they were being celibate, and then their husbands were pissed off. And Paul's stupid advice is go have sex with your husbands, because when you don't, they have sex with prostitutes, and that means Jesus is having a sex with prostitute because we're all parts of the body of Christ. Stupid advice. Don't tell women they have to have sex with their husband because, first of all, it's not good sex when not everyone wants to be having it. And number two, that's stupid advice. Some people have a theology where they believe that whatever you do, whenever you're bad, you retroactively, through time, make Jesus bloodier and in more pain on the cross. That's dumb. Time doesn't work that direction, first of all. Second of all, as Lutherans, we think if anything shoots through time, it's forgiveness and grace, coming this direction forward, right?
Amen.
This reconciling act can only go forward in time, like, woohoo, you're saved by God. But you can't, like, make Jesus bloodier unless you're in South America and you're looking up at the crucifix where Jesus is super, super bloody because that's how they like their crucifixes.
Because it's a way to feel like they're not alone. At least that was my experience when I was asking folks about it there.
Exactly. That too. But I want to read to you something from this book that is amazing, because I wrote it, and so I'm biased. It's called 3 Corinthians. 3 Corinthians is the Corinthians text that I wish that Paul would have written after this stupid stuff about prostitutes. Ready? Here we go. Dear people of Corinth, grace and peace and all that stuff I usually write at the beginning of my letters. I trust this letter finds you well. Thank you for being so cool about all that unsolicited advice I sent you a while back. I was going through a grumpy phase because I was experiencing a lot of pain from a leg injury. I'm maturing in faith and have come to the conclusion that God is God and I am not. By this, I mean to say that my near-God experience gave me a bit of a God complex. Some of my previous letters were written in my false belief that I am better than you. I've since learned that we all make mistakes in life and love and faith. Since we last communicated, I discovered that married life is much harder than I imagined. And, despite my best efforts, we divorced and are now seeking to repair our hearts and put our lives back together. In the midst of my transition, it has occurred to me that I have begun to live into some of the traits I previously judged you for. I'm sorry. Love is a lot harder than I thought. I have stumbled and misstepped even when I was acting in the best of intentions. In my struggles, I learned more about God's patience, redemptive power, and forgiveness than I had ever known before. Instead of listing a laundry list of faults I found in your community, I wish I would have listened more to your pains and lessons you learned as you reconciled with God and your neighbors. I hope to visit you soon and share my apologies in person. Until then, feel free to share all my letters with others as a reminder of my arrogance and as a lesson to judge others less. Thanks again for putting up with my youthful obnoxiousness. Love in Christ and doing my best, Paul. Don't you think he should have written that letter?
Right?
I'm just saying.
All the hard stuff that he says and all the stuff about the, yeah, I think that would be a great response.
Because that reminds me, all this stuff that Paul wrote, sometimes I just want to be like if you read in the papers recently about the cardinal that the Pope Francis just demoted because he's being a douchebag in public. I'm probably not supposed to talk like that, but I did. He has decided, living in his all-male community, in his best experience, that the reason that the church is having problems, and whatever laundry list that sounds like something Paul would come up with, is because of the feminization of the church, because them lady nun peoples have more rights than they used to. Right? So if you've ever thought to yourself, why are people who don't have sex telling me about how I should have sex in my married life? Or why are people who only hang out with boys trying to tell women how to behave? And why are people who lived a long time ago and don't even know how stupid an iPhone is when it's not updated properly and you're out of memory telling me how to behave in the world? Then the good news, if you're Lutheran, is you don't have to follow any of these stupid rules. The thing that's difficult, though, is that we still have to figure out how to live with each other and how to behave in the world. And that's been the Lutheran dilemma since the beginning of Lutheran dilemmas in the 1550 year. 1556, is that the right year? 1550. When the Lutherans became the Lutherans. Nailing a thing on the door, right?
I can look it up. We're coming up on...
It's 1550, I think it's 6. I'm going to put my weight on 6.
Right.
Anyway, Lutherans believe that you don't have to follow any of these rules because, remember I told you from the beginning of time, God's grace and love and forgiveness sails forward from this cross moment and there's nothing we can ever do to screw it up? So that means we don't have to follow any of the rules in the Bible. We don't have to follow any of the rules of society. We don't have to do anything. We can go and murder everyone with bombs and guns and blah, 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 and God will still love us. That doesn't mean we do it, or that it's fun, or that God wants us to go do that. It just means we could, and we would get away scotch-free. And that sucks, because as people who have experienced the harm and the pain that comes from other people behaving in whatever way they are able to because of God's forgiveness and love. We understand that it is hurtful when people injure those we love, or when people say bad things, and when they don't follow the stop sign and they hit us with their car. Like, all of these things have really real consequences, right? Just because God can forgive us doesn't mean there aren't like real consequences that we experience every day, from broken bones to being put in jail to people being mad at you to gangs and wars and all that other cruddy stuff in the world. So what do? The Lutheran idea is kind of that out of your gratitude, you're going to be so woohoo, God has saved me and freed me, that you are going to choose to do good things that help your neighbors and are awesome. Which is great on our good days, not so great on our grumpy days. And we have to kind of hope, as Martin Luther King Jr. Is often quoted as saying, that the moral arc bends towards justice, that we are ever moving towards justice, and God is going to get us there even if we don't understand it or see it, or we think it's taking way too damn long. We've also got to figure out how to be in community together, how we're going to decide things in our church building, what kind of Robert's Rules of Orders we might use, or if we're going to just let one important pastor person make all the decisions, or if we want all the bishops to make all the decisions, or how we want to decide who's going to vacuum the carpet, and how we're going to deal with the fact that if we choose not to follow labor laws that say that everyone has to be documented, how we're going to protect our building and our assets and our taxes so that we can have the privilege to break those laws and do what we think is a more just law. So these are all of the things that we continually face, and the thing that we've been also trying to figure out to do is how we answer this call from God. Last week we talked about this a bit because there's this call that comes from the baptism of Jesus, where there's this voice that's kind of saying, "Hey, schmuck, go do your job." He said it nicer, though. He said,
a little bit nicer. "You're
the one I love. You're gonna be the Messiah, dude." That was kind of nicer.
That's a little nicer.
Yeah, it's a little less direct in our own lives, and we have to figure out what it means to like figure out what we're supposed to do. It could be as simple as figuring out, like, when you take that, what is that, the ASVAT? What's the test you take in high school when you're a junior that tells you what jobs you should be?
I've heard of people taking that. I don't remember actually.
And it's sponsored by like the military or something, so that the right answer is join the military.
I don't know, because I have asthma, so that was never the right answer for me.
Well, there's a test. All the high schoolers know what the name of the test is.
Hey, I found out what year it was.
What year was it?
It was 1517, which is why the 150th anniversary is coming up in 2 more years.
Which is why 1556 is an answer. It's just a really bad pastor answer.
Well, no, because it's in your head, because we keep hearing about all these 150 anniversary plans that are being made. And
yes.
So that's why it's in.
Good save, Amanda. Good save.
Yeah.
I was just going to say it just gives everyone permission to, like, be wrong sometimes, but, you know.
That too.
Yep. Dates in history never really worked so good for me.
That's why we have resources online.
Yeah, I can tell you the date. Yikes, Ola. So there's also this cool guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who I like a lot. He wrote a book called Sanctorum Camino. It's a really geeky book because it was his doctoral dissertation, so it's got lots of fancy Latin words in it, hence Sanctorum Camino. Just means the community of saints. And he was wrestling with this difficult thing, and he thought you could have really different simultaneous calls from God. So you could have these really legitimate list of rules you were supposed to do, the 10 Commandments, and this rule that you weren't supposed to kill people, and also he could be a part of a time and a place where God is calling him to kill a person, namely Adolf Hitler. And so he was trying to reconcile with, does this mean that when he's judged with all the German people, that he will be condemned for the atrocities that happened, and yet as an individual who strived mightily to end the atrocities, he might be judged as someone who's doing okay, and then as someone who's a Christian. So he thought you could even be judged in different spheres of your life. So, like, maybe I get saved because I'm a Lutheran and I'm baptized, but God doesn't like that I'm a part of a community that has contributed to global warming. Or I get bad points in the judgment because I didn't help do anything to stop genocide in Africa, but I get really good points because of all the times I tied the shoes of homeless people and helped them be fed. We don't know the right answer because we don't actually know how this is all going to go, but what this conversation is leading to is not how do we figure out what to do based on how we'll be punished, which might be how we figure out how to live in the world based on what consequences we're going to have. Which bills do we pay based on how much they're going to punish me? Or which rules do I follow when I'm driving my car because I'm in a hurry and I want to drive a different way based on what the punishment would be for doing that? This is really more a question about how do we center ourselves on God? How do we seek for justice in the world? How do we try to be a part of what God is up to? And comes from the place of knowing that you are forgiven and baptized, and so you're not worried about it on like a level of wondering if you're going to go burn if you don't turn, as crudely as some people would say, but you worry about it because you truly love God and you truly do want to be a part of things being better in the world, and you truly do want to see justice happening. And so I like the way people are talking about different kinds of nuances about it, that it's not so simple. There are ways we get things right. There's ways we utterly screw everything up. There are ways that some things are completely hopeless, and the ways that other things get better much faster than we could have ever expected, and ways that we kind of continue to yearn for God's justice. And so that's way more fun to me to think about than whether or not men can have sex with prostitutes, which would be what we're talking about if we're literally talking about the Corinthians text. And by the way, they're called sex workers now, and some of them have unionized and have created feminist ways to be a part of their work, and have safe and sane and consensual ways of being a part of their own sex roles. So, the end of Corinthians. Do you have something you want to say, Amanda?
All of these things kind of lead us into the other two texts for the week, aside from our psalm. We have 1 Samuel and we have the Gospel of John, and they're both talking about this weird thing that Christians talk about, which is call and sense of call. And I was talking with my text study group yesterday about how, we might have in other areas of our lives where we have parts and pieces of what the church offers to the world. So we have the ability to be a part of community, and we have meal trains, and we walk alongside each other in tragedy, and we celebrate with each other in positive stuff, and we do all the pieces of church that and do justice work and show up and hold up signs saying no Keystone Pipeline, and hold up signs saying you are loved and welcome to Portland, even if these people over here are holding signs that tell you otherwise. It's been a pretty crazy week around here. So people from many, many communities can show up and be doing that kind of justice work. The difference that we have in our Christian community is we talk about doing some of that work because we are called to do it. And this whole sense of what is a call and a calling is a particularly faith-based way of looking at the world and understanding how we interact with our world. And so I think prior to being a Christian, this idea of being called to do something, I think I had I would say it was like, well, what am I meant to do in my life? These are the things that I'm really good at, but what am I meant to do? What am I supposed to be doing to make the world a better place? And once I had been baptized and then started finding my way into the Christian vocalizations of experience, the language would shift to, well, I'm discerning what my call is in my life. So I'm trying to listen and hear and figure out where I'm supposed to use my gifts and skills to make the world a better place. So in 1 Samuel, we have this story of this character, and Eli is an old prophet. He's an old character. He's blinded. There's conversation, there are verses in here that are talking about how the word of the Lord is rare in these days. So the people are feeling not as guided by God, and not like God is really, really, really with them and in their community right then, and people are doing things that, you know, you might say are ungodly. People are doing things to take advantage of other people. They're doing things that harm other people. Systems of oppression are being created and are being perpetuated.
Is that
And
like
people,
an old-timey ancient thing? I've never heard of such a thing.
never ever have we heard of such things as these kinds of situations. So this is the time and the kind of setting that we have this story, and there's this character, there's this young guy, Samuel, who does not yet know God. So this is not someone who has been saved. He's not a cradle God follower. He doesn't know about God yet. And God starts calling Samuel into action. And Samuel responds by going to the person that he serves, by going to Eli and saying, "What do you need?" Because it's really hard to find a way to understand when you're being called to a new purpose, and figuring that out is really hard. And so Eli finally figures out that God is the one who is speaking to Samuel and says, "Go, lay back down, and when you hear this voice, say, 'Speak, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel obeys. Samuel stays there, and when God says, Samuel responds, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And Samuel was told this horrible story of all these terrible things that are going to happen to Eli and Eli's descendants. And Samuel is going to be lifted up. And in time, Samuel becomes the one who says, this person is going to be the king of Israel. If ever you want like Old Testament books that read like total soap operas, 1st and 2nd Samuel. Totally dig into it. There's kings hiding in the backs of hay bales. There's people being lifted to power and being shot down from power. Everybody's getting killed. It's like the Game of Thrones in the Old Testament. So 1st and 2nd Samuel, totally recommend them. They're a great read for that kind of a read. You're not going to find a lot of kind of gospel, everything is going to be okay in the world type stuff in there. What you're going to read is basically a historical soap opera. So, but this idea of trying to listen and figure out where one is called and how one is being called to serve God's people, by being open to this, Samuel is then lifted up. Not a word of his fell to the ground. He knew the Lord, he learned about God, and he lived this life that was serving God's people. It didn't work out great in the end. He doesn't do that much better than Eli did, but he lives his life trying and doing what he can. So when we talk about call, it's not always how well do you follow that call, how perfectly do you follow it. It's not do you get it on the first go round? Do you immediately know exactly the first time that someone talks to you that this is exactly what you're going to do and you never stray? That's not realistic to expect of ourselves. But call is this, and you see it in this text and you see it in the gospel texts when Jesus is calling Jesus' disciples. The call is this interesting, malleable weirdness of trying to just figure out purpose and how we can use who and what we are to build up God's kingdom. And we're going to fall, and we're going to falter, and we're going to screw it up, and we're going to get back, and we're going to try better, and we're going to do some more work. But following that call is what I think a lot of these texts are about this week. Go ahead, Megan.
Well, I was going to just say that the idea that Samuel doesn't get it right the first time is something that's echoed in the John text, and is kind of the argument that Philip and Nathaniel are having about Jesus, is how can this guy be the guy who's going to lead us into the future when he's just a country bumpkin from the middle of nowhere? Nazareth being smaller than my sanctuary, such a tiny place that you could walk past it within 5 minutes. Not just drive past in 5 minutes, but walk past it in 5 minutes. Essentially, if you think of like 30 huts next to each other, and the huts are made of stone, you'd have about the size of Nazareth. And Nazareth is, if you were a sophisticated person, would sound like the stupidest word you could ever say out loud, right? It would sound like barbarians talk. You would never use letters like this in this combination in the Greek. Nazareth. It would just, you would sound like
Hoboken.
a Neanderthal. Yeah, it would just be.
I mean, I'm not making fun of people who were in Hoboken. I grew up on the East Coast, right? But
Amanda's making fun of Hoboken, but
I'm not making fun of Hoboken. How about Chick-Shinny? I grew up in Chick-Shinny for a little while.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, right? Like, they're just...
I grew up in Minnehaha County, which is just fun to say.
Right.
But, so Nazareth is like a horrible name of a tiny little country bumpkin town. And Nathaniel and, well, at least Philip is from Bethsaida, which is at the northeastern part of the Sea of Galilee, which is actually a lake. But if you want to think about where he's from, he's essentially from the major trade city that you have to be a part of. It's so important that the people still fight over it. It's called the Golan Heights, people. Heard of that? The Golan Heights, people fighting? It's the Syrian border, where the Syrian border butts up against Israel, because the Sea of Galilee is fresh water that people can drink, right? And if you think about countries that are in the desert, you have your trade stops along where you can get water. And so Petra, or the place where they thought that Moses struck the rock and made water happen, if you're going through Jordan, you can get water at Petra, and then you have to go to the Sea of Galilee and your next stop as you're heading on the trade route. The reason that Syria would never, ever in a million years, and means it enough to try to build nuclear weapons if they cannot move their border an inch, even if Israel has main control of that section, is because it means they would have no water for their people, and they would not be able to continue. And so if you think about what would happen if the entire United States only had one water source that we could pull from, right? We have that problem every single year in California when we have to do water rationing, and we fight all the time. Should it go to the farmers? Should it go to the people who need it for drinking water in the big cities? Should it go for watering lawns? Should it go for plants for fun? Should it go towards showers? And we fight about what kinds of uses we want to have for our water. The Sea of Galilee is not that different from that. This is also, Philip lives at the point of the Sea of Galilee that's connected to the Jordan River. And so he's like the hip dude who is a part of a major Greek stronghold and would kind of know what's up. He would be the one to be like, dude, this guy is really not going to be what's going to happen. Nothing good is going to come from Nazareth, of all places. It's going to come from my hippity-hoppity town, right? Because we've got iPhones and we've got whatever, and you don't even have broadband wireless, right? So if you imagine that kind of conversation, if you've ever been the new kid in school, or you've had people in your high school say you're not cool enough to be a part of whatever, you're never going to amount to anything because of the city you came from or the activities that you were up to, this is kind of the like schoolhouse tactic that's going on at the beginning of this conversation. And then Jesus says, I saw you near the fig tree, which I didn't see any fig trees the entire time I was in Israel. So I don't really know what that means. It makes me wish that it was actually Bethsaida, which is very close. It's the place where David looked at the lady who was taking a bath and wanted her. And so we don't know how Jesus looked at Philip under the fig tree and was like, hey, I saw you. John's Gospel is the most If you're leaning towards a reading of Jesus being someone who has a beloved who's a man, John's Gospel is the story that says Jesus has a beloved that's a man. I mean, there's the beloved disciple who is a man. The words that happen with Jesus at the crucifixion say that the beloved disciple is now to Mary, the mother of Jesus, says the words of a Jewish wedding ritual, uniting families together when someone becomes your mother-in-law. So if you were ever looking for a reading that would lend itself to Jesus looking at Philip under the fig tree in a smoky, sultry, queer as folk kind of way, this would be the gospel for it. But that's not the city he's from. So that's kind of a stretch, Pastor Megan, but it was fun to think about for like 4 seconds, wasn't it? But there's something about Jesus seeing Philip under the fig tree that's kind of fishy for me, because really, who wins an argument by saying, "Oh yeah, remember the time I saw you under the fig tree"? Nobody! Nobody wins an argument that way, but Jesus wins this argument. So either Philip was up to something, and he was doing something illegal or that he should be ashamed of, and Jesus was like a wink wink, like the woman at the well, like, "I know how many husbands you have."
Who knows?
I saw you under that fig tree. Argument 1, drop the mic.
That's what I'm going to use from now on. It's going to be my new one. I'm like,
I told you I saw you under the fig tree.
I saw you under the fig tree. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, no.
But then he gets to do the, like, cool, like, you think I'm nothing, but I'm going to descend on the clouds. I'm going to be the Son of Man, right?
Oh, dear.
I know, I did it like a gangster. It was awesome. But how cool would that be? Like, to get, this is John's Gospel, and John's very, like, overly dramatic, romantical, poetic-y. I am he and you are he and we are me together. So it's okay that we don't understand, because I don't understand most of the verses in John's Gospel. But wouldn't that be the coolest comeback ever? If you, like, really, Back to the Future knew, Back to the Future when he goes to the time when he goes into the future. Instead of going back, he goes to the future, but it's still called Back to the Future, so it's confusing, right? So when he goes to the future and he learns about what he's going to be like and what his kids are going to be like, if you could, like, go into the future and you knew you were going to be like the Steve Jobs of the 3000s, right? And you could come back and be like, yeah, but I'm going to invent an iPhone, boom! And nobody would know what an iPhone is because you hadn't invented it yet. But it'd be awesome. It would be awesome. I'm going to come down in the clouds. That's what Jesus was up to. Totally. Otherwise, the story doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And I think I saw you under the fig tree. It's okay for it to not make sense. I mean, it's the Gospel of John. It doesn't have to always make sense, and it's gonna be weird, and that's okay. The other thing that people could be talking about this weekend is that it's Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. Diversion. That's a diversion because Pastor Amanda doesn't know what's happening in John. Segway. I'm not even preaching this week, so it doesn't matter that I don't know what's happening in the Gospel of John this week. But that's, I mean, again, I lean towards taking all of these passages with the sense of call stuff going on there and ignoring the fig tree because I don't know what's going on with the fig tree. Fig tree! So if we want to talk about someone who followed call but didn't always get things right and sometimes bumbled around, is that Jesus telling us that fig trees are awful? I'm going to come from the clouds. I'm going to come in the clouds. I saw you under that fig tree. I pity the fool. Oh, dear Lord. So, Martin Luther King Jr. weekend and stuff, I recommend the movie Selma for people to go see it. And if it's near you, go see Selma. It is an incredibly powerful film. It is not easy to watch. I cried a lot, not like sobby cries, but like just weeping cries. And it was very, very powerful. And if, like me,
you are someone who has not had a lot of history or knowledge in that area for whatever reason that you might not have received that part of our history, then this is a good way to maybe start stepping into finding out more about that history. And I know for myself, as I was sitting there watching the film, I kept thinking, why do I not know this story? Why do I not know this story? And I think that's still a part of what I'm processing several days. I saw it on Monday. Today is Wednesday. And I'm still processing, why is it that I don't know this story? And in a month, I'm going to be at a worship service where the current Dr. King Jr.'s daughter, she is going to be speaking as the keynote speaker. And if you're in the Portland area and you would like to come, I think that there are still tickets available to the Empower the Dream event. Megan, I'll make sure you have the link to put it right down here for those who would like to come and hear her speak, especially in the current context. I think it was pretty impossible to watch this film and not see parallels to protests in Oakland, California, and not see protests in Ferguson, Missouri.
They won $1.6 million yesterday.
What's that?
The protesters in Oakland were treated so horribly by the police that the police had to pay out $1.6 million to them, and that was awarded yesterday, I think.
Wow. So yeah, it is really, there is one particular scene, and I don't know if this movie was filmed before or after Ferguson and Hands Up, Don't Shoot. But there's one particular scene where I felt like I had been punched in the gut because it was Ferguson. And for this to continue to be happening how many years after these people made this sacrifice, I think it's just kind of, it's an overwhelming and powerful thing to be thinking about this weekend as we come up on MLK Jr. Day. And if we want to pair that up with this call and calling and trying to figure out how to use your gifts and skills in the world in a way that benefit the world, and knowing that you're going to mess it up, and knowing that you're going to not be perfect in your marriage, and that you're going to make mistakes in your marriage, and you're going to make mistakes in how you speak and what you say, and it's pretty darn powerful. So I recommend the film. I recommend an opportunity for you to hash that out with other people if you can. I was thrilled that I've been walking and spending a lot of time with the local African American Baptist congregations and their leaders in my kind of the 1 mile radius around my congregation. And I was thrilled to have one of them come with us to see the film and to get to sit down and talk with him over lunch about kind of the disparity between why is it that he knows this story but I don't, and how did he learn the story, because it's certainly not in our history curriculums in the United States, and those kinds of pieces. So fascinating weekend for that. And I commend it to folks. And I'll get that link to Empower the Dream down here for you. I'm going to be there, and I'll be doing the benediction. I've been invited to do the benediction at that event. So me and my roller skates are in the picture. So we'll be there.
Nice. I learned the story learning about the pastors in San Francisco who are working on justice issues and rights for LGBTQ folk in the 60s in San Francisco, and their first journey and their second journey, and the people who stayed here in San Francisco who were talking about how they regretted not going, but they chose to stay here because there was so much work to be doing here. But we're glad that they had kind of representatives who could go with them. And so I probably won't be seeing the movie anytime soon, in part because I like to choose when I'm doing intense stuff. So much of my work is intense, being with the homeless so often, and so oftentimes my personal life has enough of that kind of still happeningness to it, and so I choose when I watch movies that are about those kinds of things. But it's definitely going to be on my queue for a time that I can watch it on a smaller screen and in a choose my own intensity, eat whatever I want while I'm watching it kind of way. So know that.
Be aware for those who are in a similar situation like Megan. I'll give a heads up that there is a particularly unexpected, right in the very beginning moment of truth and clear depiction of the loss of some children.
Right.
And so I think all three of us jumped and were incredibly startled. I practically jumped out of my seat and sat there just with my hand over my mouth for a good 45 seconds. So for those for whom that kind of, it's kind of like you choose when you watch Saving Private Ryan, right? You choose when you watch this film.
You choose when you go to the Holocaust Museum.
Choose when you go to the Holocaust Museum. And like I have chosen to never see the really, really bloody Jesus film that Mel made, or whatever his name is, made. Like there's a certain level of, for many of us, where you don't have to take that kind of thing in, and I get that. At the time when I saw Saving Private Ryan, when it was in the theaters, I felt it was good for me to see that, to understand a little bit more about war. I think that it was good for me to see Selma, to understand a little bit more about what the people I'm walking with on a weekly basis have lived through. But as Pastor Megan said, truly watch it when you're able. Don't watch it if you don't have the personal stores and the emotional opportunity to process that, because it's a lot of stuff.
Or Google it, or Google pastors talking about it. A lot of pastors went on it, and they probably are going to tell the story in a way that's a little toned down enough for kind of general consumption to at least get you some kind of awareness of what you're going to see before you see it, because sometimes just having a heads up can help you prepare for it too.
Yeah.
The other thing that you could do is you could read Psalm 139. That's right, Psalm 139 is in our reading today, and I put the whole thing down here, even though only part of it's going to get read on Sunday, because it's the best of all the Psalms that we're talking about today. And it's pretty good for the rest of the Psalms too. It's pretty amazing. I not only put the whole thing on there, my congregation, when we were doing Bible study yesterday, they told me the Psalm should have ended at verse 18, right? Because it's really beautiful. Like, every word is worth memorizing. You searched me, you've known me, I sat down, you raised me up, you discern my thoughts when I'm far away, you search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's so high I can't attain it. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to the heavens, in the clouds, right? If I ascend to the heavens, you are there, and I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. So even if you're in hell, God is with you. You can't ever be separated from God. It couldn't possibly be God, because God would always be with you. If I take the wings of the morning and settle in the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed me in my inward parts. Right? Inward parts, which is nice if you're a trans person who doesn't like their outward parts, to think your inward parts are the ones that God formed, right? You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld the uniform substance in your book were written all the days and were formed of me, and none of them yet existed. How weighty are your thoughts, O God, how vast the sum of them. If I try to count them, they are more than grains of sand. I come to the end, I am still with you, and here it comes. Are you ready for it? Verse 19. Oh, that you would kill the wicked, O God, and that bloodthirsty would depart from me. Right? Those who speak of you maliciously and lift themselves up against your evil, do I not hate those who you hate, O Lord? Do I not loathe those who rise up? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them as my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me in my thoughts. See if there is any wicked in me, and lead me in the way of the everlasting. Now I was thinking as we were talking about this text, you see where it gets diverted, right? Everything is wonderful, and I'm amazing, and you made me, and it's beautiful. Yay! Except everything I hate, you hate, and everything you hate, I hate, and we kill, and we're blah, right? This is a good reminder that even the good parts of the Bible had moments where they should have just went like this. They should have just taken their pen and ripped it in half and just stopped writing. Just write the good parts. But they didn't. And so, if you are someone where you have a particular part of the text that you love and other parts of the text that you think are very disparaging and you hate and want to throw away, know that this book is bigger than you. And texts that go from like really wonky, from I love everything, everything's amazing, to kill them all, I hate them, within the same like text, reminds me that this book is so much bigger than ourselves. And so maybe the closing thing that I'll talk about a little bit is the I Am Charlie stuff, where you've got one side that is using really bad killing, shooting, murdering, terrorizing methods to say, you have to do what my God says or else. And the other side says, no, I don't, because your God agrees with me. Right? And so it's kind of like Tina Fey and Amy Poehler were talking about on the Golden Globes when they were talking about the movie The Interview, about the North Korean dude, and talking about how because the terrorism was happening, because there was a threat to freedom of speech, we have to pretend to like things that we normally wouldn't have liked. The Charlie Hebdo magazine had a circulation of 60,000. Their current magazine, which I think is a stupid idea, and has a picture of the Prophet Muhammad declaring that people are forgiven and saying that he's on the side of the magazine, will sell over 3 million copies. It's already sold out in France because controversy sells magazines. It does not create peace. Never once has a politician said, I'm going to have a flashy press conference where I say the other side's stupid and horrible and stinky and God's on my side, and the other side gone, well, you're probably right, we'll stop fighting you now, right? That's not how it works. You have to have, you have to give something to get something. You have to, when we are always trying to believe that God is either on this side or on this side, we will always have fighting happening. And I think the bigger mystery is how God can be on both sides, right? Both the side of the people who are using despicable methods that we can't stand by and the side of the people who are victims. And that, for me, is a God worthy of a title God, right? Because anybody can agree with you. You can get politicians to agree with you. You can get lots of people to buy your magazine, to stick behind your principle, but to get someone who can hold up both of those things and say, I love you both because you're all children of God. I yearn for better, and let's find a way to get there. And I'm going to outlast all of y'all. And we are going to get there. And I can't believe you're acting this way, right? And it kind of goes back circle to what we were talking about before, is as Lutherans we think you don't have to follow the rules. So we think God is just as much with the terrorists, as much as I hate to say it, as with the people who are the victims of the terrorist. And it's a much more complicated space to live. It means there's no easy answers. It means you can't have a fancy hashtag like hashtag I pick those guys. You can do that because God will still love you, but it's equal with the love for the terrorists and the love for the victims and the love for the people who made the movie Selma, and for Pastor Megan and Pastor Amanda and all of the people, right? So it's complicated and it's stupid because it would be easier if we were the kind of people who had a moral compass that would stay steady, or that had a bandwidth for compassion that was big enough to handle all the nuances of the world. And instead of those things, we have a God who loves us just as we are, when we do our best and fail, when we do our worst and do great, and all of this places in between that we find ourselves. And it's complicated. It's not as easy to evangelize that kind of God, because there's not like, let's have a parade that our God loves everyone. What? But I think it's more befitting of the word God. That's just me.
I'll say that my sermon on Sunday, which I will after this be posting up on my blog, kind of touched on some of those things because of not just seeing I hadn't seen Selma yet, but because last week between Charlie Hebdo and a certain group of folks from Kansas who came to protest in Portland and a responsory counter-protest on last Saturday morning. Just a really interesting situation to be present as God poured water, God's sign of grace and baptism, down on everyone standing out on that corner, and a rainbow came to fly over everyone in that particular context, which is not just a sign of LGBTQIA pride. It is also a covenant promise from God that no matter how much we screw it up on earth, no matter how many mistakes we make, no matter how many divisions we try to create, no matter how many wars we have, no matter how we take advantage of our earth, the promise of the covenant of the rainbow is that God will not wipe us all out again, that the world will not be completely destroyed again. That's the promise of the rainbow. So to stand in that space and to understand that everyone who is in that space was a beloved child of God, no matter what was being said, spoken, or proclaimed to a bullhorn.
Or which side of the gun they were on.
Or which side of the gun they were on. When it came time for the prayers of the people, I could just say, we pray for this group, and we pray for those of us who don't know how to pray for this group yet. Because you don't have to be able to pray for people who cause harm to other people. Maybe starting with praying for your own heart, that we can find ways to pray for people who harm other people. It's tough stuff, and to be a believer in radical grace, I sometimes say it's offensive grace, because it can be really offensive to believe that God's grace really, really does extend to everybody, and that's a very hard thing. But at the same time, I would not want to worship a God who wasn't big enough to be able to do that. So, what Megan said. And as far as Psalm 139 goes, and maybe we'll end on this happier.
Yeah, we should find something happier. I'm like,
so Psalm 139, I learned in high school prior to that whole baptismal water experience by being a part of district chorus, where we sang beautiful music, and I had no idea I was singing a psalm, and no idea that I was really singing about God. So I'm going to find a video of Set Me as a Seal, and we'll post a link down here, because it's a really, really beautiful choral arrangement of Psalm 139, and can be beautiful to have stuck in your head. The section, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, My soul knoweth that full well. It's really, really, really beautiful. The whole thing is just a stunning arrangement of that psalm.
Do
So
they
I
put
love
the
that
end
one.
in it? Is the
Nope,
last verses from
nope,
19?
no,
That's shocking.
no. Shocking, isn't it? Surprising,
Yes,
huh? Yeah,
that's
no.
right.
No, they crop it in the same place that most of us crop it for public consumption. But anyway, we shall say thank you very much for being with us.
I'll
Stay away from fig.
say,
If you don't want to lose an argument, stay away from fig trees.
don't go to the fig tree.
And have a good week. We'll see y'all soon.
I dropped the mic, but it's a headphone. It's not as cool.
Easy. Yeah.
All right,
Bye.
bye.